Please welcome to the stage the absolutely incomparable KARIM AINOUZ. So, thank you so much for being here and sharing this amazing, thrilling film. And of course, we all know that you're one of the best contemporary filmmakers around right now.
Wow, thank you.
And this is your first English language feature, actually. So, I want to start with, how did that idea come about for you? Where did you, start with this? And where did everything start for FIREBRAND?
It started, I think, in 2020. I had done a movie that won a bunch of prizes, and then I was introduced to a wonderful producer who was in the beginning of the screening, who was in the room, obviously, and it was actually in Berlin. It was just before the pandemic, and she met me and she told me about Catherine, and she told me about the story, and then I was really fascinated by Gabi, but I couldn't really get the story because I didn't know where the age was. So through the beginning of the meeting, I sort of bluffed my way through it, and then went home and talked to my agent, and I said, "Are you sure that she thinks I can do this, and why?" And then it was during the pandemic, and she sent me a bunch of books about the Tudors, and I learned who Henry was, and then Catherine really was. And then she told me something that was very, it was really, really important. She thought that Catherine had sort of the DNA of a lot of the characters that I had done before in different contexts, particularly in the films I had done in Brazil, and I think a lot in Invisible Life. And I was very intrigued, and the more I learned about Catherine, the more intrigued I was, and the more surprised I was that there was not another movie made about her before. So that was the first thing that made me really want to do this, because I thought there was a character that had been invisible. It's like whenever the research I did, there was a lot of invisibility about Catherine. There's a couple of biographies in the book that the film is based upon. So I was really in love with her. I was really thinking, how come this has not been done before? And then on the other hand, I was also really fascinated by the world of the Tudors. There was nothing farther from my reality than the Tudors, but yet it was really fascinating. It was actually, I thought this is actually a period sci-fi film, because it was so far away, but yet it was so fascinating because there was a lot of color, a lot of gold, a lot of blood, a lot of passion, a lot of betrayals, all these things that make a good opera. And that didn't feel English as we know it. I think English culture has been so much portrayed to the lenses of Victorian England. So I felt really compelled to enter that universe, but I also felt more than anything compelled to tell the story of this character that we knew so little about, at least me. And I also was very, very interested in Henry because I thought when you decide to make a film, and particularly a period film, I think that this should be a profound reason for it to be made because it's a lot of effort. And Catherine reminds me a lot of women today, and also Henry reminds me, unfortunately, about a lot of men who are in power in the last few years. So I thought it was important. It was an interesting endeavor to talk about him, but to not talk about the orange and white men that we know that are around us. So it felt really like something I needed to do.
And so the incredible thing about that is that Alicia and Jude are such a great pairing, and they match each other's emotional intensity throughout the film. So I want to, can you talk a little bit about the casting process for that? How did you know that you had found your king or your queen?
Yeah, it took a while, because I think for Catherine it was really important that there was somebody who could hold the whole story without a lot of explanation and without a lot of frontality. So I think there was something about Alicia which was fascinating, which was the sense of mystery and the sense of you don't really know where she's going to take it, because you didn't really know where it's coming from, because with Henry it's so volatile. And so I think with her, what was interesting was this: the mystery that she could, lend to the character, and also the fact that she doesn't. For me, she's very much a woman of today. So I think it was like the end, you know, like I think it's important the film ends with punk rock, and I think it's important that the character has a bit of that, you know. In the original book that we based the script upon is called Queen's Gambit, so we couldn't use that title because it's too late. Somebody did it before. But it was about that, you know, it was about this person who don't really know what she's thinking, and she has this really eloquent silence that I thought was fascinating. And a sort of stillness that I think is really, really important for this character, so to not fall into something sentimental in a bad way. And I think Jude it was wonderful when we met. I mean, there was something about his love for, love in the sense his curiosity for Henry and what he was and what he meant for English history. And there was an element in Henry's biography. He was this sort of golden boy of his time, and he was a sportsman, and I think he was also sort of a pop star. Like the song that he sings here was a very famous song. And I think that there was something in Jude that also at that moment in his life, it was also that, but I think it was also the fact that he was intrigued by this character to a level which was fascinating. But for me, the game changer was his warmth. I think there was something really warm about whatever he does, no matter what role he takes. And I think it would be too easy to do this character without that, you know? So I think that was very cool.
And I think they really do bring out that warmth in each other. You do believe that
Yeah.
there's that love there. And more than that, there's quite a few really difficult scenes with Alicia.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask, you know, how was it shooting those? Was there rehearsals? Were there conversations about?
There was all of those. I think I normally try to rehearse a lot before I shoot. I'm not the kind of director that can go in and don't go in like to the scene. So there was a great thing about making this film as well, because the method was very much like what I used to do when I made films in Brazil, for example, that we had a lot of time to rehearse. So we discussed a lot all the scenes we did in this film. We rehearsed them a lot in costume and in on location, so to kind of understand. And I think the other thing that it's really important to say here is, I know I'm a director, but you know, I think there's actually the director who decides and who I am the, you know, whatever, the chief of the boat, or whatever it's called in English, but I really hear, and I love to hear my actors, and particularly actors of this caliber. It's really interesting. And so I think there was a lot of the scenes that are there that are propositions, either from Jude or either from Alicia, for example. From Jude to be very explicit, you know, the whole sort of mouth-fucking thing that there is throughout the film. It was based on a serial killer that he researched, you know, that did that a lot. So that he brought to the story that was not on paper, you know. And Alicia, for example, the whole scene when she is masturbating him, that was something that was her idea. So a lot of the stuff that's there came out of this work that we did together during the rehearsals, and a lot of the dialogue that was on the script also sort of. And for example, the last scene was something that we really found in the rehearsals. I was researching a lot. I was talking to the stuntman and finding out how long would it take to kill somebody with that strategy. And it's about 2 minutes and 48 seconds normally. So we did rehearse like as a dance, you know. So a lot of what they brought, a lot of what's on screen, when I say being direct is also listening, you know, and also taking in things that are good for the film. And sometimes the actors, and a lot of the times the actors propose things which are incredible. So it was wonderful. They really were committed to the film, and they really proposed things that ended up on the screen, which are really great.
It sounds like a really, you know, rhythmic, collaborative process, and the world just feels so real and lived in, from, you know, the locations to the cinematography to the costume design. How was your journey kind of putting that team together?
It was hardcore. It was hardcore because, you know, being like a Brazilian making a movie about, you know, an English king, like they had everything to kill me, you know, if this wasn't done right. It was like if an English person did a movie about, you know, sort of a very famous Brazilian character, like, and the Brazilians would be like, huh, can you do this? So I needed to sort of be very well covered doing we did a lot of research. I mean, I spent over a year researching, and it was research that had to do with things that are very concrete, you know, like what colors were the fabrics, what did people eat, how did they heat the castle, did they have animals, what did they wear, you know, when they were not in presentation. So questions like what's the jumpsuit of the time, you know, and things like that that I didn't. And we're very, very fortunate because it's a culture that has a lot of records, like historical records. So we had this incredible historian who normally lives like this. She has these books called How to Live Like a Tudor, to Live Like a Victorian. So she did live like a Tudor, you know, like she didn't shower for a certain amount of days and she cooked, you know, so the whole daily life process was something that was very, very well researched, and we had the most incredible costume designer that we could have, who was a man who had done a lot of period pieces before, but not the Tudor time so much. So he really went deep into research of fabrics, of silhouette, of like the way everything, every costume I think in this film was made for the film, because I was really worried about the light on the fabric and the materials that were in the fabric. So there was a whole lot of research also, and then if you want to do something which is also what the film is, which is kind of it's like a fantasy of history. You do need to have something that is very grounded. So it was fun. It was really exciting to enter this world and to have so much information about the details.
The interesting thing about this is that it's such a well-documented period, but there's so little on Catherine. So that's what's interesting about that first quote where, you know, men in war, but women are kind of left behind. So I'm kind of thinking, what is it that you want, you know, your audience to take away from this? You know, we're thinking about now, we're thinking about then.
Yeah, I think it's a hard question because I don't want to be prescriptive, but I think that yeah, I think the first thing is about legacy, in my opinion, and it's about what is the legacy of a tyrant like Henry, what is the legacy of Catherine. And I think the legacy of Catherine is motherhood seems a bit square, but it's education, you know. And I think when you see the way that she educated these kids, you know, the generosity of a woman who's educating statues, and somehow she is the person who forged Elizabeth, you know. And it's funny because we're discussing what should be the last scene of the film, and also what's written at the end. And I think it's interesting that Elizabeth not only came to power, but she stayed in power for 45 years. So I think this is something that she learned from Catherine. I was really interested in also celebrating the fact that Catherine was the first published writer in English history. But above all, I think for me what was very, very exciting is to understand soft power and how soft power is something that is, for me particularly as a man, I learned a lot. I learned this, you know, doing this character. And last but not least, I think it's also a film which is about the end of patriarchy. And I think the end of patriarchy cannot come without violence. Because patriarchy is so violent that I think there is no other way around it. So I think these are the themes that were very, very exciting to explore. You know?
It was exciting to watch. I think we have time for a few audience questions.
I'm very curious.
So everyone has, let's start here.
Yes. Congratulations, what a beautiful movie. My question to you is if you can talk a little bit more about how the costumes, the craft of the costumes.
Yeah.
They were so beautiful, very with a lot of attention to detail, and the colors, the contrast, the textures.
Yeah.
So the whole creation, it was very beautiful to watch on the screen.
So the question was about the costumes and the detail of the costumes for those who didn't hear. It was really fun, you know. The first thing for me, it felt like I was in a carnival ball because it was, you know, again coming from a country where carnival was so pivotal. So there was a sense of joy in doing those costumes, and there was a sense of precision. For example, the red, just to give you an example, like the colors. A lot of the colors were colors that were there for a reason. Like the red was a therapeutic color. So the reason that she's wearing red is not because I do like red, so it was like, it felt like I had it in love. But in the way that things are, you know, in the layers, for me it was very important that we sort of did all the layers, because one less layer in one more room, you know, like the more intimate it becomes. And there was a lot of research done with embroidery. There's a whole tradition of embroidery that actually comes from Portugal that was very much used in the costumes at the time, and also the fabric and the way that the costumes are put together. There is no buttons, for example, when you look at them, it's all stitching. So there was a whole study of the engineering of costumes at the time that, for me, was really interesting. And I think it was really good to rehearse with them, because then I think they didn't become, because it was very tricky to do this, like the costumes are so seductive that they could become about that, but I didn't want them to be actually clothes that people wore, and not, not costumes that, actors put on to do a show. So that was, I think, the biggest sort of challenge in terms of color engineering